What's up, YouTube? We are back at it again with some hand histories from the Subaru. Oh yeah, I know, you're excited. Alright, let's jump right into it. I had reached out to someone who I had played with a few weeks back, seeing if they wanted to put in a session together. Really cool guy. Anyway, just decided to come out on a Sunday, which I usually take off just because I feel like the games generally aren't that great on Sundays or Mondays. It's kind of family time. I know the next day I'm going to be spending with my son Benjamin, so I generally don't play on Sundays, but we kind of decided to meet up. So head in we do, and I think our must-move game is like 7 or 8-handed, but it fairly quickly kind of breaks down. And at this point, I think we're 4-handed. When I pick up pocket threes under the gun, I open to 20 and 3-5 no limit. I think pretty standard. Any opening smaller, I think is just too small because of the size of the rake. The rake in this game ends up being, I think, $7 or maybe $8 if you get to a river, which is just way too big. So, it's better if they fold pre-flop, and if they don't fold pre-flop, well, then you want to be playing bigger pots post-flop when you're in position. You can maybe make an argument even for opening larger to like 25, so that when you are playing pots in position, they are larger and you're making more money. Anyway, so he calls, so it folds to the big blind, and he calls 15 more. We go heads up to a flop, which comes deuce, deuce, 9. About as good as it gets, really, for pocket threes. He checks, and I bet 30. This is a situation where I could be betting smaller, but I don't really want to necessarily get called by much here. Sure, if we bet too large, then maybe we can't really get called by worse, but I think he's going to have a lot of ace highs here, maybe some king highs that want to continue. Just a lot of hands that are going to float that, think that I'm going to be c-betting way too wide here. So I bet 30, and he check calls 30. The turn is at 10, and he checks once again. At this point, it feels like if I'm going to be double barreling here, it's going to be hard to get called by worse. It's hard to imagine that he can be calling with worse unless it's like exactly maybe some hands like Queen Jack or King Jack, which have now picked up a straight draw. Everything else I would expect to fold to a double barrel here, unless it's like exactly maybe Ace King, Ace Queen, that just think that I'm getting out of line here too much by double barreling. That being said, if I check back this turn, I think I'm going to get exploited a lot. Like, it's going to look like I don't really have anything. He's going to lead the river, and I'm put in like a precarious spot where it's like, well, now he gets to lead his river with his 9s, his pocket 5s, his 10, like pretty much about as wide a range as he'd like. And I'm in a tough spot. Like, what do I do? Not to say necessarily that people are going to be exploiting a ton in these particular games, but I end up just deciding that betting this turn is never really going to accomplish much except fold out his equity with like his overcards. I just can't be getting called by worse, so I check it back. The river's a king, which I would think is much better for my range than his, and now he leads $20 into me. When he leads for $20 into me here, I think he just always has a pair. I don't expect him to be betting the sizing with ace high. If he does have ace high, I would expect him to bet larger as a bluff. So to me, it specifically feels like a 9, like exactly, like maybe 8-9, jack 9 suited, something like that, that has a 9 on the flop. Now on the river, the king they don't like, and so they're trying to get to a cheap showdown. They don't want to check and have to call some big bet. So I decided to target exactly a 9 and make it 85. I thought about going larger just to maximize the fold, but I thought if I go too large, maybe it's going to look really bluffy. And he pretty much instantaneously mucks a king face up, which is clearly not what I was trying to target. I wasn't trying to get him to fold a king. I assume that if he's folding a king in this river, it's not king 9 or king 10. So I guess he was floating flop with like king queen, king jack, maybe just king 8. Just I don't really know exactly. Maybe king jack, king queen exactly. I'm pretty surprised that he's bet folding these. Maybe he feels that I'm gonna have like ace king here a lot. Maybe he just doesn't really think. I don't really know what's exactly going on, but I'm really surprised he folded a king here. Obviously, I would be raising this river with like my ace king and king queens because I believe both of those are just ahead. I'd probably size down a bit because I'm trying to get called by worse, but I don't know if he specifically like knows this or realizes like what I'm doing exploitatively. But obviously that was nice that he ends up folding the winner to us. This next hand, we are now 6-handed. I open under the gun of the straddle player to 35 with king queen offsuit. The player straddling is the aforementioned player who previously had folded the king on the river when he made top pair. Folds to him and he defends. When he defends, I think he's doing this fairly wide, but I could be wrong. I tend to believe that people who straddle are straddling because they like to play poker, and people who straddle don't like really folding when somebody raises. Maybe if maybe if it's like a button raise or calling a lot wider than an under the gun raise, but obviously it's going to depend on the player. Anyway, we go heads up to a flop, which comes Queen Jack 6 rainbow. He checks, and I think I'm just going to have the best hand here like a big percentage of the time. I bet 40, about half pot, and he calls fairly quickly. At this point when he calls, I just think I have like the best hand always. I think he's going to have some weaker queens, maybe hands like King Jack, Ace Jack for second pair. The turn is a deuce of clubs, which is a great card. It now brings a flush draw. Still think I'm way ahead. He checks again. And obviously, I want to ensure that he's going to call. I feel like if I bet too large, I'm just going to get folds from like the weakest part of his range. I want to continue to keep his calling range wide. I think he's drawing fairly slim. So I bet 75 to kind of try to keep in some of his weaker hands. Obviously, he's going to have some hands that have equity against me, like King 10 and 10-9 for straight draws. But I think it's more likely he's going to have a hand that has like 5 outs, like maybe a hand like Jack 10 or something like that. So he ends up snap calling this turn bet, and I think it's just like fairly obvious that I have the best hand, and I'm going to be able to get a good amount of river value here if it's some brick on the river. The river is an offsuit king, making me top 2 pair. Obviously a good card for me now that I have 2 pair, but I think it's kind of a bad card in that if he has like Queen 10, he now loses to some of my hands like King 10, Ace King, King 9, which has a gut shot. Similarly, if he has a hand like maybe Ace Jack, he again loses to some of these straight draw hands. So really the only way that this is a good card for me, for him to continue on, is if he has like exactly King Jack for now making top and bottom, or King 10 for an open ender, which now makes top pair. He now loads up a bet and ends up betting 150, which obviously like I'm happy about because I think I have the best hands. But now I kind of start thinking about like, can I get value from worse? I look over at his stack and I think he's playing about 320 more. And so I feel like I have the best hand a lot. I want to get called. But the question is, is it too thin to be jamming here? I look over at him and his neck is throbbing. And whenever there's a situation in which someone's neck is throbbing, I think it generally means excitement. And an excitement in this case is going to either mean a really big hand or a really bad hand, like a bluff. Like let's say maybe he's got, I don't know, Ace Jack is turning into a bluff, or Jack 10 and is turning into a bluff with a straight blocker. Which leads me to want to just call, because obviously if he's got like nuts or nothing, it's going to be a hand like 10-9, maybe even Ace 10 for a gut shot, or it's going to be a bluff. So after thinking about it for a bit and realizing that I think jamming here is essentially only targeting exactly a hand like King Jack, I end up just calling. And thank God we just called, because he ends up having Ace 10 of clubs for the Stone Cold Nutter Butters. He called on the flop with a gutter and an over, turned the nut flush draw, and then on the river made the nuts. So obviously it kind of stinks that he got there. Won a fairly decent pot off of me, obviously getting an extra 150 on the river. It's one of those situations that kind of stinks, because like all of his outs are ones that don't improve me. So it's a situation in which I'm not getting any more money from him on the river unless he improves, and once he improves, he's going to be beating me. So yeah, that pot kind of stung a little bit, but I'm glad I didn't value rip the river, because obviously he's not going to be folding the nuts, and we would have cost ourselves an extra like $330. In this hand, there is a limp. Now there's an open to 25. The button calls. I'm in the big blind with pocket eights. Obviously, a hand I'm going to be defending. I call, and the limper calls as well. We go 4 ways to a flop, which comes King 4-5 rainbow. He checks through. Once it checks through, I think I'm going to have the best hand here a fair percentage of the time, although I do think that the pre-flop raiser can have hands like 9s through queens here, and not really love the king, obviously, given that we are 4 ways to a flop. So I think I'm actually going to be leading the turn a fair percentage of the time, if it's not like a 10, jack, or queen, because those will also pick up some equity for hands like queen, jack, that I think are going to continue and make it really tough for me to be able to get to showdown here as a winner. The turn is a 7, which is obviously a great card, as it is under to my 8. And now I like to bet 70 as a bluff. If the pre-flop raiser calls, I think he's going to have like 10s, jacks, queens a lot, and my plan is to be barreling the river. If I get called by the player that's first act, I think he's more likely to have a king, because he's the one that obviously would be checking on the flop in flow to the pre-flop raiser. So it kind of depends on what exactly is going to happen. Also, the turn is a 7 of clubs, bringing a flush draw. So I think I can get value here from some worse hands, like specifically turn flush draws. The player that first limped folds. Now the pre-flop raiser thinks for a bit and folds. And the button calls. The button is a player that I'm fairly familiar with. I played some PLO with him. He's aware that I'm capable of bluffing. I do think that he could have some weaker hands here, like King 10 suited, King Jack suited. I would expect King Queen to be betting this flop, but I think he could have some of his weaker kings in this range to be checking back flop in position and looking to like pot control and get worse hands to be barreling turn. So I am a little bit nervous that I am behind at this point. The river is an offsuit 9. I don't think he's ever folding a king to me. Like if he has King 10, King Jack here, I think he's just calling like pretty much all sizes except maybe like a huge bomb, and even a huge bomb he might call because now it's going to look even more bluffy. So I like to check, and I'm just looking to get to showdown at this point. I'm hoping that he has a hand like missed clubs, maybe some other missed draws, perhaps like a 5 that's like trying to hero in this situation that thinks I'm going to be bluffing too much. Also, when I check, if he bets here, I don't think he's ever betting with like King 10 or King Jack. I think it's going to be like 2 pair plus, and so it's going to look really bluffy in my opinion if he decides to bet this specific river. Maybe he has a hand like King 9 suited only for him to be betting this river. I would expect hands like sets to be raising turn now that there's a flush draw. So I think if he bets this river, he's really not repping much in my opinion. Sure enough, he ends up checking it back, and my pocket 8s are good. So I think it's quite likely that what he did was turn a flush draw. There is a new player who gets seated under the gun of the straddle. He posts and he immediately makes it 40 under the gun of the straddle. Folds to me on the button. I have pocket kings. He's playing 400. I like to make it 130. Pretty much a slam dunk 3-bet in position against somebody who I think is going to have a fairly good hand. He's a new player. He doesn't really know me. Should he be continuing wide? I don't know. Probably not. But I do get the feeling he's got a good hand, one that doesn't want to necessarily fold with a 3-bet. People don't really just sit down, open, and then decide they want to be folding 3-bets. Obviously, I can flat here and try to let one of the players in the blinds in for like a good price. But it wasn't anybody in the blinds I thought was going to be making some egregious errors. Anyway, it folds back to him, and he calls. The flop comes like Queen 9-3 with 2 hearts, I think. Queen 9x with, I think, 2 hearts. And now he just open rips 270. Obviously, I snap call. When it comes like Queen high, I'm a little afraid that when he opens pre-flop and then calls a 3-bet that he has pocket queens. But when he just open jams, that worry becomes like null and void because most people just aren't going to do that, right? Like they flop top set, why would they jam? Anyway, so I snap. He turns over, I think, ace, queen of diamonds. Turns an ace, rivers a queen, and he just makes like a running boat, obviously. He turns me anyway, but he just hits that 5-outer, and I lose this about $800 pot. A bit frustrating, obviously, to lose this 80-20 post-flop. But what I think is interesting about this hand is his play. I think his call pre-flop is like okay. I don't think people are 3-betting that light really in this situation. It's going to be hard for his ace-queen suited, I think, to realize out of position against like a decent player. A lot of times he's just going to whiff. If it comes ace high, I guess he has to check call off. I'm going to have ace king sometimes. I just don't think it plays that well. I think if you find that there is an aggressive opponent that you think is 3-betting too wide, then yeah, you can't really be folding ace queen suited. But I think generally speaking, when facing 3-bets, like ace queen just isn't going to fare that well. And then more importantly, when it comes like queen 9x and he's out of position, open jamming is obviously his just worst option. If I'm bluffing, I'm going to be folding. If I have a hand like pocket jacks, I'm going to be folding. All he's really doing is maybe protecting against a hand like ace king that maybe is going to check this back and has 3 outs to win. Other than that, he's pretty much locking out all of my bluffs, ensuring that I no longer put any more money in bad. And that's obviously a big mistake because in this situation, he's only getting snapped by, I think, aces and kings. Yeah, maybe that doesn't necessarily make a huge part of my range, but he does want me to continue with some worse hands. And by open jamming, he just obviously prevents that. I think just in general, it's the best practice is to remain in game flow, check to the pre-flop 3-better, see what they're going to do. In this situation, like obviously I think he has to go with it always. Once I bet, he's got to essentially jam and get it in there. But at least this way, maybe I have a hand like pocket 10s or something that decided to c-bet flop, and now he gets some of my money in there bad when I decide to c-bet this board. Anyway, so we lose that pot and are now stuck, I think after that hand, maybe about 500. Obviously just a tad bit frustrated. between this hand and that king-queen hand. We fought back, won some pots of our own, but are stuck about $500. I get pocket 8s and open to 20, get called by 2 players, I believe 2 seats over, and the button. The flop comes queen jack 8 with 2 clubs. Obviously a fairly wet board, especially one that's pretty great for me with bottom set, because there's going to be some flush draws, some straight draws, obviously combinations of top pair like king, queen, ace, queen, maybe top 2, queen, jack. So I like to bet 40 into 60. The next player to act now makes it 100. The button folds. When he makes it 100 and is essentially kind of like a min raise, I think this is very indicative of a queen that wants to like know where it's at. A hand like king, queen, maybe queen 10, top pair and a gut shot. It sounds silly, but you'll find some novice players will do this because they don't want to just call and not know where they're at, maybe let the button in for a decent price. They think they have the best hand, and so they want to start like kind of like building a pot, but really just finding out where they're at. At the same time, because I think it's just a queen, I don't know if I can bet 3-bet in this spot because I'm essentially over-repping my hand in that all I'm targeting is a hand like maybe some combo draw like king 10 suited, which I don't think would be raising small in this flop. So I think what I'm exactly targeting is a hand like queen jack for top 2, a hand that's just obviously not going to be folding, that maybe I can get in and against, barring some like bad turns. That being said, obviously you could have a hand just like 10-9 suited that flop the nuts that wants to like raise in position, prevent like the club from getting there, and maybe I'm gonna pile in some money. So I'm a little bit scared, but to me it feels a lot more like a queen. For the reasons that I mentioned, I think that re-raising this flop is kind of overplaying the hand. If I think that he exactly has just a queen, it's unlikely he's gonna continue. If I do like make it maybe, I don't know, like 250, 300 here. So I like to just call. The turn's an offsuit ace. I check and he checks it back. I think when he checks back here, it's fairly obvious he just never has a hand like 10-9. I think it's just going to be a queen, specifically exactly king-queen. The river is the 5 of clubs and brings a flush. I don't think that he's going to have a flush here, given how he's played the hand by like raising flop small and checking back turn, unless maybe it's exactly like ace x of clubs. Maybe like ace 10 of clubs for like a combo draw that now turns top pair. Doesn't necessarily think he can get called by worse. Checks it back, drawing to the nuts. So I like to bet 150 here, kind of exploitatively. I'm going to be bet folding. If he raises me here, I just don't think he's ever going to be doing it without having a flush, maybe even specifically the nut flush. And similarly, I think that he's just going to check back this river a ton with like all of his queens, like queen 10. Maybe I should be sizing down a little bit to target exactly king queen, but if I size down, then I might talk myself into a call if he raises, where it's like, oh, maybe he thinks that I'm betting weak, small, blah blah blah. So anyway, I bet 150. He shakes his head for a bit and folds, so I think it's quite likely that he had exactly king queen or queen 10. Feeling a little disappointed that maybe I didn't re-raise the flop, because I don't think a hand like king queen is probably going to be raising flop and then folding to a re-raise. We're probably going to see at least one more card. So I think one of my biggest leaks in No Limit Hold'em is playing too many trashy suited aces, like ace 6 suited, ace 7 suited, especially out of position. I think in position it's okay, but out of position, either limping these or raising these, I think is leak. It's just probably costing you money long term. Gets me in a lot of situations where, even if I flip a flush draw, I'm out of position. It's going to be hard to get to showdown unless like it's like a slow played pot. They just don't play that well out of position. Then you got yourself some reverse implied situations where it comes ace high, and now if you have like ace 6 suited and you lose to like ace 9 suited or ace 9 offsuit, you're like, okay, how did I get myself in this dumb spot? But anyway, I'm stuck. Obviously, you don't get unstuck by not playing any hands. So I look down at ace 6 of hearts, I think under the gun +2, and I like to make it 20. I now get called by the 3 spots to my immediate left, and we go 4 ways to a flop, which comes 9-3 deuce rainbow. See, like, what am I doing here? Am I going to c-bet into 3 other players not knowing what they have? No, I got to check. Now I essentially lose this board. Why am I making a $20 pre-flop? I don't know. See, stupid moves. Anyway, I check and it checks through. When it checks through, I'd expect somebody with a pair to maybe be betting. Obviously, someone might have like pocket 4s, pocket 5s, doesn't really want to bet. So that's possible. There are obviously some combinations of like better ace highs, like ace 10 or ace jack offsuit. Also, the turn is the 8 of diamonds, now bringing 2 diamonds. I don't really think I could be doing anything here, but checking once again. What am I really repping if I check this flop and not bet this turn? So I check, and it checks to the last kid to act, who bets 45. When he bets here, I don't really know what he's repping. I think he's going to have some hands like Jack 10 suited, maybe Jack 10 offsuit for a straight draw, maybe hands like Queen 10 for a gut shot and 2 overs. If he's betting here, maybe he has like 8-7 and just knows it's the best hand, but that's like not that many hands. I think it's way more likely that he just has either a draw or just an air ball because now it's checked to him twice and he's like, oh, free reign to bet. So I call, the next player over folds, but unfortunately this like fairly tight lady calls. When she calls, I think she's gonna have some straight draws here, flush draws obviously, but she could have some hands like pocket 5s, I don't know, pocket 7, something like that, maybe kind of slow playing, doesn't really want to be betting, but isn't gonna be folding. So yeah, and back again to like what this kid's repping. I can't really think of any hands that he's betting that are better than mine on this turn. That aren't like exactly maybe like pocket 5s or pocket 7s. So anyway, we arrive on the river, which is a 3 pairing the board. Obviously a great card for my hand, but now I'm still worried about this lady in between. That being said, if I lead, I don't think I'm repping anything. I don't expect ever a better hand fold, so that seems kind of pointless. So I like to check. The lady checks, and now I'm thinking to myself, this kid decides to bet. I think it's going to be a bluff a large percentage of the time because I don't expect him to be betting an 8 again. So it's going to look fairly bluffy in my eyes. But I was thinking about like, what am I going to do? Am I going to snap call, make it look like I have a good hand so that hopefully she folds like a small pair in between? Should I be raising? That looks kind of funny. Anyway, checks through. I announce ace high, and it's good. Obviously, so, we win kind of an interesting spot here where just knowing like who the players are and what the positions are, you can kind of realize like, he's not really repping anything. There's just way too many draws. And I think just ace high is going to be the best hand here, like a large percentage of the time. Obviously, as you can tell, my analysis is starting to get a little winded. I'm a bit tired, but we've got one more hand to go over, which is the big kahuna. After winning that hand, I think I might be up like $100. There were a couple of other like not very interesting hands, but we did battle to about even, maybe up $100. I'm thinking about quitting. It's like 1 a.m. I'm getting fairly tired. Obviously feeling good that I got out of the $500 hole when this next hand happens. So I pick up pocket queens after I believe like 3 limps. I like to make it 40. The player to my immediate left, who's been calling a ton of my raises, calls. The aforementioned tight lady on the button now calls. I think 2 of the limpers call, maybe 3 of the limpers, but I think 2 of the limpers call. We go 5 ways to a flop for 40, which comes queen, queen, 7. Yeah, I just flopped quads. That's a bit silly. Queen, queen, 7 with 2 clubs. Goes check, check. I don't think there's anything here to do but check. Obviously, we want to, A, either let somebody start bluffing, or B, hope that they can catch up. Some hands like pocket 5s, pocket 8s, pocket 9s, maybe won't be calling a bet on this flop, but if they get there for free on the turn and make a boat, now we make some money. The player to my immediate left checks, and now the aforementioned tight lady on the button bets 75. Pre-flop, I actually thought she might have a strong hand. Something about the way she called. I thought she could have some hands like pocket jacks, pocket 10s. So obviously it's nice that she's putting in money here, albeit like a fairly small bet, about half pot, a little under half pot. Folds to me, and again, I don't think I have anything to do here but just call. We want her to kind of continue on like various turns. Hopefully she'll make a big hand on the turn. And if I raise, like, well, it's really going to be calling me except like exactly pocket 7s. The player to my left in between the both of us folds, and we go heads up to a turn, which is the 3 of clubs bringing a flush. I think this turn's going to go check, check a lot. As I mentioned, I think she's got like pocket 8s through jacks here. It's kind of the read I have. If I check, I think she's going to check back a lot. Sometimes she'll have like a nut flush here when she bets this flop. So I like to lead the turn for 110 just to kind of start building a pot, put some money in there, give her the option to like re-raise, get a little wild. Because as I said, I think she's just going to be checking back this turn a lot. And sure enough, she now makes it 500. Ooh, baby. So my immediate reaction, I actually ended up like whispering to the guy to my left. I'm like, whoa. What's going on here? Like, I don't know what to do. I've got all the queens. So yeah, I started thinking about it. I'm like, what she's going to have here, because she's the uber tight lady. She's got pocket 7s. Very unlikely. I think it's pocket 3s for turning 3s full. I don't think she's betting this flop with pocket 3s. Pocket 7s makes a ton of sense. Obviously, flopping bottom boat on flush draw board. She doesn't want to give a free card, necessarily some pocket pairs like 8s through 8s plus. And she wants to start building a pot. Sometimes someone's going to have a queen here. And, now she can build a pot where they've got themselves like, a 4-outer for quads or their kicker. Anyway, so I bet 110. She makes it 500. I think she's got pocket sevens or nut flush. I don't want some cards like specifically the ace or the king to kill some action. I hadn't thought about it at the same time. 3 would obviously kill some action if she has pocket sevens, because now her boat would be counterfeited, although there's obviously only 3 more of those. So I end up clicking it back to 900. We're playing like 1500 here on the turn, fairly deep. And I think I'm in for like 1500. So like I said, I was about even, maybe up 100 to start. I was up like 100 to start the hand. I think by clicking it back, like she's just going to be calling or just jamming all of her good hands. Sometimes maybe she's got a bluff and I'm like letting her get away with it, but I just don't think she's bluffing in this spot as played. Like I said, I click it back to 900. Instantly she jams all in. I snap, turn my hand over. The river is in fact a 3, which in this specific case would have killed action because she has pocket sevens. For flopping sevens full. Obviously a major cooler for her. Also, we were 1 card away from hitting the bad beat jackpot. If the river was a 7 instead of a 3, I would have made like 20K and she would have gotten 50K. So that would have been a really nice bink. Obviously, we do bink this pot anyway, which was about like $3,300, maybe like $3,400, something like that. You'll see it on the screen. Major cooler for her, obviously, but I do think there's some mistakes that she's made in this hand. I like her flop bet. I like that. A nice small sizing for under half pot. Get called by a queen. Get called by some flush draws. Get called wide. Build a pot. I think her mistake is on the turn. When I dunk this turn, raising I think is okay. Raising to 500 I think is bad. It's just too big. Like, what am I going to continue with here? Either have like a 2-outer with like aces or kings, which is going to fold a lot. Maybe I have a hand like ace queen, which I probably wouldn't donk on this turn now that the flush gets there. Maybe I would if I don't think her hands are comprised of too many flush draws on the flop. But again, like, she's just kind of like over-repping her hand. Like, especially as like the uber tight lady, like maybe she's not aware of how she's perceived at the casino, but she should have an understanding of that, I think. And so when she makes 500 here, like, I can't continue with anything. Like, even if I have the nut flush in this exact spot, I don't think I played in this way, but I'm folding. I'm folding on this turn because if I have the nut flush, I'm blocking, her having the nut flush. And so what can she have now when she's raising? Only boats, specifically probably pocket sevens. I think what she should probably be doing is just calling here because I'm going to be drawing dead a lot. Maybe I have a 2-outer, but that's okay because if she raises a turn, I'm just never getting in more money bad. And now when the river's a 3, she ends up saving herself a bunch of money because I'm obviously probably going to bomb this river. And now she can either hero fold, thinking that I got lucky, or she can call like $400, $300, and have saved herself some money. Yeah, that might be a little results-oriented, you're thinking, but I do believe that she kind of misplayed her hand here by making a 500 on the turn. Because I honestly don't believe I'm going to be continuing with like anything worse here in this exact instance. Like, I honestly don't. Like, if I somehow arrive on this turn with pocket 3s, maybe that's the only hand I continue with because I'm like, wow, does she really have 7s? But other than that, there's just no hand I'm really continuing with. And it's obviously unlikely for me to have a hand like queen 3 suited or queen 7 suited, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities. Like, it wouldn't be the first time in my life I've raised a trashy hand like that. So I just don't think the way that we arrive on this turn that there's many hands that I can continue with that are worse than hers when she makes it 500. Anyway, so obviously we ship that monster pot, get ourselves from like about even to up quite a bit, end up booking a $1,900 win like to the T, maybe within like an hour. I play for about another hour, maybe another pot or 2, small pots. And so book a $1,900 win. Feels good. Obviously, just a really sick cooler for me to scoop this pot in this exact instance. But I think the major takeaway from today is I was obviously stuck about $500, but I didn't really let it affect my play. I think the worst hand I had opened was that ace-6 suited. I do think that is negative EV, kind of in middle position, but like not something too monstrous. There was some spots where I got 3-bet and just decided to fold. So I think it's just important, even when stuck, just to continue playing as well as you possibly can. Anyway, that's all for now. It's time for me to get to sleep. Catch you guys later.